welcome to another edition of Shed Talk. And in this video we're going to have a quick look around the shed, a quick shed update, and pay particular attention to a number of outcrosses that I have recently got and brought into the shed. And we will, while we're looking at those birds, talk a bit about why I get outcrosses, the purpose behind it, and how I go about all of that. But before I do that, as always, thanks to all those of you who have subscribed to the channel, and don't forget, if you do enjoy the videos, please do hit the like button, and if you wish to subscribe, hit the subscribe, and for early notifications then do hit the bell. There's a number of videos coming up towards the end of December that I suppose I'm going to call them sort of Christmas special type affairs. I'll talk a bit more about that in the next video. So if you don't want to miss them, then don't forget, subscribe and hit the bell. So let's have a look at these two, or a couple of the outcrosses that I have brought into the shed. So as I said, we're going to have a look at the outcrosses that I've brought into the shed. But before we do that, I thought I'd talk very briefly about why we might want to bring an outcross in. And I suppose there are a number of reasons for bringing one in. The first of those is clearly to improve your birds. When we go to look at the birds, I'll talk a little bit about what I was looking for in the bird or in the outcross for my particular shed. So that's the first one, is to improve your birds. So you're looking to get something into the shed that's better, or has some qualities that are better than those of your shed and that you're looking to improve. The other one is just to increase the gene pool within the shed. And this sounds a little bit contradictory to some of the discussion that we had in some of those very early videos, where I was talking about trying to get the gene pool limited as to those genes that you want in your shed. So what you're doing when you're selectively breeding is you're trying to trying to keep the genes that of the good quality birds, whilst trying to get rid of the genes of the poorer quality birds. So if you're looking to improve the blow of a bird, you're hoping that you're going to pull all the good genes around blow into your shed, whilst eliminating those genes that aren't, by continuously breeding birds with the type of feature that you want. So this works for a little while, but then after a number of years, clearly the inbreeding coefficient in your birds becomes quite high, and actually you tend to find that you will start to go backwards unless you bring something else in that adds that vitality to the birds, some extra genes that add that vitality to the birds. So that's the other reason why you'll be bringing a bird in. I suppose finally is you might want to bring in a particular variety or colour. So let's say you want to start breeding, I don't know, recessive pied. You don't have any recessive pieds in your shed, so you might want to think about bringing in recessive pied in, so that you can add that variety to your shed. That's not something I particularly do. I don't have any particular varieties that I'm interested. I wouldn't mind breeding Texas clear bodies, or any of the clear body varieties, to be all honest. But I'm not sure I would go out and purchase an outcross specifically for that. It may be that I'll, do a swap or whatever with a friend or a colleague, or a friend, another breeder. But it's unlikely I would go out specifically to purchase it. If one became available, then maybe that would be the case. So those are the reasons why you might want to bring an outcross into your shed. So the next thing I'd say about outcrosses is try and stick to just one or two breeders, 1, 2, 3, maybe three different breeders. Don't overly mix and match your outcrosses, so don't get one outcross from here and another outcross from there. And the reason for that is you want to try and, whilst you're bringing in new genes, you want to try and have genes that are compatible with what you've already got within your shed. So if you got your initial stock from a top quality breeder, a good breeder, so birds that you're happy with, and you've got, then I would suggest initially you go back there to look for that outcross, a slightly better bird than the ones you initially brought in for your initial stock. So apart from making sure that the genes are of the birds are likely to mix well, it also means that you get to know that breeder, get to trust them, and they get to know you and get to trust you, and you build up a relationship with a breeder, and he understands your birds, he knows that you're going to come back, or he or she knows you're going to come back time again, and that relationship will mean that you're likely to get the birds that you're looking for. We must also, I suppose, the other thing to say is that clearly that breeder is going to get outcrosses at some stage to bring into his shed, and it means that your bloodlines are going to be relatively similar. So it just helps with, I suppose, creating a bloodline, a stock of birds within your own shed. So that's a quick discussion around why I would suggest you only go to 1 or 2 breeders. Find someone that you like the style of their birds of, speak to them, and I would then suggest that you go back to them more often than not for your outcrosses. So this video then, in the main, is not going to be about getting your first bird. So this isn't about going out and purchasing your initial stock of birds. If you'd like me to do a video on that, about how I did that in the beginning, then let me know, and I will do a video on that. But this is really about, you've already established your shed a little bit. You've worked with those birds you initially got, and you're now looking to bring in the outcross to take you on to that next stage. First thing then is you do need to be clear about what it is that you're looking to improve. So what is it that you're looking to bring in? Have that clearly defined in your head, and if you can, before you go to the breeder for that outcross, let them know the type of features that you are looking for. Now, don't fall into the trap of getting a picture of, you know, one of the best birds in the country and saying, I want a bird that looks like that, because, you know, no breeder is going to sell you that type of bird. Think about a particular feature that you're bringing, as I say, that you're thinking about bringing in, and focus in on that. So and for me, while I'm talking about that, so for me, the feature I was looking to bring in was I wanted something I noticed on the show bench when I was comparing my birds to those birds that were winning, was there was something about the shoulder and the width of the face that those birds had. When I spoke to the breeder about it, I mentioned around the cheek patches and how to increase the size of the not the cheek spots bit, so not the colour, but the overall shape of those cheek patches, and how to improve the size and the width of those cheek patches. He mentioned that it was like the keyhole effect, so, you know, where the bird becomes quite narrow in the face, so you end up with a keyhole type shape. So that's what I was particularly looking for, and also I suppose a little bit around trying to improve some of the directional feathering of the bird. The other feature that I wanted was to try and improve the overall size of the bird. So whilst that overall width, the overall size and length of the bird, and that style of bird, I suppose, was what I was looking for. So I wasn't too worried, you know, if the bird didn't have the best spots, or if the bird necessarily was a little bit flecked. I didn't want anything too flecked. So in terms of those other features, I wasn't overly concerned about those. So that's what I was particularly focusing on. So be clear when you go to the breeder about what it is that you're looking for. The next thing is think about how much you're willing to pay for the bird, and have a very clear price in your head about what you're willing to pay. You know, if you're one of these people with loads and loads of money and you want to go out and spend, you know, £500, £600, £700 on a bird, then that's fine. For me, that, you know, way outside my budget. I needed to think about what it was that I was willing to spend, and then have that discussion with the breeder. I was fortunate that the breeder brought that up when I was out talking about the outcross. So we both had an understanding of the price I was willing to pay, and he had an understanding of the type of bird he was willing to give away, or not give away, but willing to sell at that sort of price. Now, as I said earlier, if you get to know the breeder and you trust each other, it may well be that he'll give you, if you keep going back there, he'll give you something that maybe is a little bit better than your price range, just because he knows that you're going to come back and to him for future birds. So that might be something about when you build up that trust and that relationship between the various breeders that you go to. So clear about the price that you're willing to spend, and if the bird you're looking for in that shed for that price there isn't one, then don't be scared to go away without anything. Both the breeder and you, it's that choice that you both have. He has a willing to sell at a particular price, and you have a willing to buy a bird at a particular price. If you're not happy, just say no thanks, not this time around. Speak to him about whether perhaps he might have something a little bit older that he's finished using that might have those features, or when that happens. So at the end of the breeding season, when he's doing his assessment, if there's anything that's coming out of the cage that he would be willing to then get rid of, like the older bird or something a bit younger, or so forth. So like I say, you're not going to get the best bird. No breeder is going to sell you the best bird in their shed, so don't expect that. However, what he might be willing to do is to sell siblings. So if he says, here's, when he shows you, undoubtedly, which he will do, is show you some of his better birds, let you have a look at those and see, so you can talk about them with him. Then think about the siblings of those birds, and because they will be containing some of those genes of the features that you might be looking for. So it might be that you're going to buy a lesser sibling rather than those birds. So that's a little bit about going out and purchasing and what to expect when you get to the breeder's shed. So when you go to the breeder to or visit them to buy the outcross, try and make it a bit of a visit and a catch up. You're going to be there, try and be there for 3 hours and really enjoy the visit and make it a learn experience. So talk to them about what it is they're doing, how they go about breeding with their birds, and so forth. So try and get as much information from that top breeder around what they're doing as possible. The other thing to do that you might be able to do, some breeders will allow it, others won't, is take along a bird. So it can be either the best bird you've got in your shed, or maybe one of the, I suppose, the mid-range birds, your average bird for your shed, but take something along to compare with. So he pops the bird that he's looking to, or that he's willing to offer you at the sort of price range that you've got. You can then look at that compared with one of your birds and look at whether it's got the feature, it's going to improve the feature that you're looking for. So there's pros and cons about taking the best bird and an average sort of bird in your shed. I suppose the best bird, it might give you, see whether actually is that going to improve, or already got that feature. Your average bird, it will let you see the overall quality of the bird you're bringing in and how it might improve the overall quality of your stock. Like I say, some breeders will let you do that, some won't. So have that conversation before you go. Don't just turn up there with a bird. Final thing I'm going to say is, it's buyer beware. The breeder, particularly if you've got that trust with the breeder, is not going. Most breeders are going to be genuine with you. There will be one or two who won't be, but if you buy the bird and it's in good health when it leaves their shed, or you make the mistake of buying a bird that isn't in good health and clearly isn't in good health when you leave their shed, clearly you're not going to want to do that. But if you did, but if you buy a bird that's in good health when it leaves their shed, and when you get it back to your shed and it then falls off the perch, then that's not the breeder's fault. You've bought that bird, he sold it to you in good faith, you bought it in good faith, and sometimes these things happen. Clearly you might, it is buyer beware in that case. So And again, I go back to that point at the very beginning. Think about building a relationship up with someone that you trust and you can continuously go back to. But don't go, if you buy a bird and it looks perfectly healthy when it leaves the seller's shed, you get it back and 2 weeks later, the bird dies. Don't go posting that all over social media about how you've been done bad by this breeder, because it's a bit like when you go and buy a second-hand car. It is buyer beware. So there you go. That's what I'd say about the visit to the shed. So I actually got 2 birds in total. One is this sky blue here that is the main bird that I purchased, I suppose. It has the features, I think, that I was looking for, as I said, that increased width across the face and also that length. Really, from my point of view, this bird will definitely add quite a lot to my stud. I was quite fortunate that actually this bird was in a breeding cage and was taken out of the breeding cage specifically for me to purchase. So that was very lucky. I'm very, very grateful for that. So this is the main outcross that I got. I was then fortunate that this breeder also gifted me this hen, cinnamon sky blue hen. So a young bird. So all of these are 2020 birds. The hen is a fairly late bred 2020 bird. It's clearly not as good as the cockbird, but it was a gift, so shouldn't refuse it, and it's got some of the genes of the breeder's shed, so it may well combine nicely with this cockbird. So I have put these two together in the showcase just because they were bonded, and the breeder suggested that I pop them in straight away, hoping that they will perform for me. The other bird that I got was this opaline sky blue cockbird here. It's quite ticked across the top of the head, as you can see, which is not unusual for opalines. And as I say, it's not as good as the, or it's definitely not as good as the other blue cockbird that I got, but it didn't cost me anywhere near as much. So and it was one of those birds that has a few features that I'm looking for. I think it will add something. I need to think obviously quite a lot about what I would be going to put this bird to, given the tick-in. It does have quite a nice depth of mask and some quite nice big spots, so it will add something, I think, to my shed. It's not bad in terms of its size, although it's not as big as, certainly not as wide width-wise as the main purchase. So those are the birds the outcrosses that I've got. So we got our birds back to the shed. What do we do with them then? You'll hear lots of people talking about quarantine, and I do recommend that you try to, if possible, quarantine the bird when you get back. But if you're like me and you've only got a small shed, what are you going to do with it? It's got to go somewhere. So it could either go out with, in a separate cage in the main flight, or it can go into a separate cage in your breeding room. Like I've got 2 separate sheds. For me, it came back, and the birds that I bought went into the stock cage for a period of time, just so I could keep an eye on them really. I gave them about a week in there. Most people will be talking about months of quarantining. But you need to think about why you're quarantining your birds. So you quarantine birds so that, first of all, if there's anything in that breeder's shed, if it's bringing any diseases back, then it's not going to pass those straight on to your birds. That's the first reason why you would quarantine. I would always recommend when you get the birds back that you give them a mite treatment, just in case it's got mites there. The other reason you're quarantining the bird, I suppose, is because your birds may have grown immune to some diseases that the bird you're bringing in hasn't. So you'll need to make sure that the bird's not coming into contact with some infection, some virus that's in your shed, but your birds are built up an immunity to it. At some point, you need to mix your birds, and there is always a risk that that mixing of birds, that the bird may be perfectly healthy but be carrying something that your birds aren't necessarily don't have the same immunity to, and vice versa. So there is always a risk that when you do mix of birds, that that may become a problem. If you're going back to the same shed over and over again, the risk is reduced, just because you're buying birds with the same level, similar immunity to similar viruses. The other thing I'd say, and I did it with this bird, is you buy an outcross to get it in a breeding cage. So don't be scared to get it into a breeding cage with one of your birds, and use that breeding process as the quarantine process. So there's no reason why it can't sit there for the next 3 months breeding and producing lots and lots of chicks for you, and you're not mixing it with your main flight. So don't think that you've then got to put it in the main flight and then get it back out of there to breed with. Why not get it into the breeding cage? In my case, as you saw, the bird, I actually got a free hen with the when I purchased the birds. It was gifted to me by the breeder, so it's gone in the breeding cage with that hen. They were bonding, as I think I said earlier. They were bonding in the showcase, both at his shed and on the way back. So I'm hoping they will go straight down. But the other bird I got, when the cage becomes free, that will go straight in there with one of my hens. So don't be scared to use the cage, the breeding cage, as part of your quarantine process. Well, there we are. That's just about all we've got time for in this edition of Shed Talk. Where did I get my birds? Well, there will be a video coming up that I've going to call Shed Talk with, and it will be with that particular breeder and the visit I did to his shed. So it was very interesting. He spoke quite a lot about his birds and the way he does things in his shed, and that will be coming up. I hope it will be being released on the 24th of December, so just in time for Christmas. So as I say, if you don't want to miss it, then don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell to get the notification of when that goes live on Christmas Eve. So that is, as I say, just about all we've got time for. In the next video, we will be probably having a look at how we're getting on in the breeding cages. At the moment, it all seems to be going tickety-boo, so that's the good news. But until then, please do stay safe and enjoy your birds.